again talking to you about the Trump tariffs and the effects. So tonight I thought I'd just do a tariff 101 and just kind of tell you how the tariffs work and the impacts that they have on, American society. So to do that tonight, I decided to enlist some help from the Council of Foreign Relations. I have a 3-minute video we'll watch. I'll probably interrupt it a couple of times, but then we'll talk about it some more on the other side. So let me go ahead and get that queued up for us. And let's see here. Got that ready. We're all good. All right, here we go.
You've probably heard a lot about tariffs in the last couple of years. But what are they really? And when countries impose them, who wins and who loses? Tariffs are essentially a tax on anything imported. Businesses that buy foreign goods pay this tax to their national governments. For example,
All right, so I'm gonna stop there. There's two things that she said that should be very important to you. That first of all, tariffs are a tax. Okay. Most people around here don't like taxes, but tariffs are a tax. And the taxes aren't paid by, in this case, the Chinese, right? They actually are paid by American businesses for goods that are imported from China. So that being the case, I'll let her continue.
if the United States imposes a tariff on goods from China, American companies importing those goods must pay U.S. customs to bring them in. After that, a few things could happen. The Chinese company might cut prices so potential customers stay happy and keep buying their products. But let's say the Chinese company doesn't cut its prices. In that case, the importing company in the United States might accept a smaller profit to keep its own customers happy. But what typically happens is that businesses pass some or all of the cost of that tariff on to consumers. So prices rise, and the consumer ends up paying more for the same product, or they just don't buy the product at all. But why do governments use tariffs in the first place? One reason is to try to protect or to prop up domestic industries that are losing out to imports from foreign competitors. Another is to retaliate against unfair trade practices by foreign governments. For most of the last century, tariffs fell out of favor. Much of the world came to see freer trade as a benefit. It boosted growth, it expanded consumer choices, it lowered retail prices, and the competition fostered and encouraged innovation. This made companies more efficient. It also made them more profitable. But recently, tariffs have surged back into prominence as a favored tool of President Donald Trump. He's used them more than any president since Herbert Hoover. He's slapped them not only on China, but also on U.S. allies like the European Union, Mexico, and Canada. These tariffs mean U.S. producers that import materials or parts, they have to pay more. That makes their products more expensive. And that leads to fewer sales and more job losses. Tariffs also invite retaliation, which has led to reduced exports. Take China.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop right there and just kind of summarize. Tariffs are a tax. They are generally paid by U.S. corporations, and it's highly unlikely that China will make cuts to the cost of the unit cost of a product in order to get favorable pricing to the American people. And it's highly unlikely that businesses will take less profits, right? So the cost is generally passed off to the American people. Now, she also talked about the fact that Donald Trump is the first president, since Herbert Hoover, this was like 1928, 1929, who decided to use tariffs in this particular fashion. Now, I will say, in defense of, I guess you would say, the Trump doctrine in this place, in this case, China is guilty of manipulating its currency, and China is also guilty of theft of U.S. company intellectual property. All right, so that being the case, the Trump administration decided to claim it was a national security risk, or China was a national security risk. So they were going to enact some tariffs in certain areas. So, and we saw tariffs on steel, right? Now, those tariffs on steel not only impact China, but they also more so impacted our allies. We only get something like 8% of our steel from China. So China, even at 8%, really, I mean, questionable whether or not that you can really say that that's a national security risk. But if you're also sourcing still from your allies, I mean, what does this say to your allies, right? And we saw that there was a retaliation um, on steel by allies as well as China. So that being the case, not quite certain. It really, you have to do something. I get it. You must do something. At the end of the day, I just don't know, as I kind of move my head around, I just don't know if the tariff window is the proper window. I will let her end this, and then I'll pick this up on the other side.
The United States is China's biggest trading partner. It imports more than $500 billion in goods every year. Americans buy iPhones, clothing, washing machines, and much more. But the U.S. also exports $120 billion a year to China. These are things like aircraft, machinery, and soybeans that all head east. So after President Trump imposed tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods in 2018, China responded with tariffs on U.S. goods. This led to a drop in U.S. exports to China. Predictably, bilateral trade between the two giants fell. Partly as a result, trade and economic growth are slowing worldwide. Traditional trade patterns are shifting too. U.S. companies are buying more clothes from Vietnam and more smartphones from South Korea. China's now getting more of its soybeans from Brazil and Argentina. And across the United States, farm bankruptcies are on the rise. In response, the U.S. government has pledged nearly $28 billion in subsidies for American farmers. That's about $7 billion more than the government's taking in from China tariffs. So yes, tariffs offer a potent weapon for countering unfair trade practices. But tariffs also raise costs for local companies. This leads to lower demand for their products, it reduces their sales abroad, and it costs jobs and profits. It also unsettles global markets. So in the end, who pays for tariffs? As we've seen, it's usually you, the consumer.
Okay. All right. So again, tariffs are a tax. Said this already. The taxes are generally paid by U.S. corporations. China doesn't lower the unit costs, and we don't anticipate that the business here in the States will decide to give up on profits, right? So that cost is generally passed off to the American people. There is something that needs to be said. There was a period at the beginning of this trade war that corporations told the American consumer that they were not going to pass off that cost to the American people. That tune did change after the deal was inked with the Chinese in January of 2020, right? When the China, everyone referred to it as the phase one deal with China. And of course, China was on the hook to purchase roughly some $500 billion worth of U.S. goods. That would have been up substantially, some like $200 billion from their 2017 commitment, right? Or what fulfillment, I should say. So everything was supposed to be great from that point forward. So we thought that the tariffs, we would no longer obviously need them if they fulfilled their commitment by 2022. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward. Now, something that you should know before I fast forward, just remember these tariffs that were put in place, they were put in place 2017, 2018 under Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act. And of course, in that section, it talked about how you can use these tariffs over a 4-year period. And once that sunsets, of course, then we would do a review, or the administration would do a review and check with businesses and see whether the tariffs were, well, if they did their job or if they didn't. And if they didn't, do you wish to continue? And of course, the business community decided that they wished to continue in 2022 when the 2017 tariff sunset, and then in 2023 when the 2018 tariff sunset. So we're still in this tariff picture. Okay, so another thing I want to tell you, I mean, I talked about the phase one deal. And just wanted to show you this on, yeah, okay. I wanted to show you this part because it's important that you understand. I talked about the phase one. So you see here that we have, let me see if I can grab my annotation tool here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to draw. So we have this is the 2017 baseline, this green, or not green, the blue line in the middle here. And then you have the actual export line right here. And this here, in the red, is the 2-year purchasing commitment. So remember, in 2020, the deal that was inked in January was that China was supposed to step up their game when it comes to U.S. exports. So Trump is then saying that he's got these guys to the table, he's secured the deal that we needed to have, and look forward to the Chinese holding up their end of the bargain. Well, as we can tell, I mean, out in December of 2021, at the front end of 2022, they were nowhere near their target, right? They were more on schedule with what we saw in 2017 when it comes to buying. So what that means, and she also mentioned that when it comes to the tariffs, the Chinese started sourcing outside of the United States when it comes to our exports, right? So they started getting soybeans from Argentina and also getting soybeans from Chile. And also, they stopped buying Boeing. Boeing is one of their biggest exports. Why? Planes, right? So they started sourcing more Airbus, European, right? So that affects us in the long run, right? So it obviously affects Boeing, but it affects the United States as well when it comes to just trade. And of course, think about it. Tesla's making cars in the United States. They moved their operation to, I do believe it was Shanghai. So I think they're making 2 of them over there, the Model S3, whatever the hell it's called, and the Y, right? So they're building those vehicles over here and just shipping them over to that plant in Austin in order to finish it up. So, I mean, there is an impact, folks, to those tariffs. And remember, my setup in the previous video was to basically tell you, hey, the inflation that you are experiencing is 2 parts. One part is the money spent between the 2 administrations, especially around COVID, right? So the money that we were spending in order to try to make the American people whole, right? Trump spent money. The Biden administration spent money in order to try to make the American people whole. That run up, what I refer to as stimulus, that stimulus we saw run all the way up to 9% inflation. So now we're back down to about 3.5% inflation, but remember the target is 2, right? So what I contend is that getting back to 2% will be difficult because that 2% baseline that we had prior to 2017 did not include tariffs, right? So because those tariffs are in place, it obviously will, and that's what we are saying, or economics is, or those guys say. I'm a political scientist, but the economists will tell you that it will cost jobs, it will reduce sales, and it will lower demand over time, and it will cause behavior changes. So if a country is being, well, assigned a tariff, they will probably retaliate against that other country, right? And one of the ways to retaliate would be to source in different places. So you're not going to buy from the people who are slapping tariffs on you, right? Okay, so but also think about this. Here's the big point about the Trump tariffs. The Trump tariffs, or that whole notion, was centered on this policy of being tough on China. And, you could either go to war with China or you could go to, well, economic war with China. And we didn't want to go to war with China, where we're throwing bombs at each other, right? But we decided to go down this course of a trade war with China. And the reality is this: we're no better for it. Actually, we're a lot worse off because of it. The American people feel it in their pocketbook. Businesses see it with, especially when it comes to, think about it. I just mentioned Boeing, Tesla, and all these different, they're still making money, but they had to go other places in order to make up some of that revenue loss. And you can see that, you can look at their stock picture if you want to, but I'm not here to talk about that. But what I'm here to say is ultimately is that tariffs have a cost, and there's a price that will be paid, and it will be paid by the American people, right? So I don't want the tariffs. We need to get rid of them. And we need to really think about how we wish to deal with China. And I think the only true way to deal with China with regard to this space is to move things out of China. We must be able to have these businesses need to go other places. That's why, I don't understand why the Trump administration was so down on TPP, because, TPP is how you actually, I think, get the Chinese to yield. If you show the ability to get other partners, then the Chinese have to come to the table. But right now, they don't have to come to the table because they can get other partners as well. But if you take that industry out of China, look, for those people who are thinking you bring it all home, you can't bring it all home. Okay, and there's obviously arithmetic reasons why you can't bring it home. That is, okay, are you ready for this? Wait for it. It's this. There's only 170 million people in the workforce in the United States, where in China, their workforce is like 730 million people. So you're not going to get the throughput that you currently have with the Chinese, with 130 million people, with people, or in the United States, which is 100 and let's say 70 million people. Not going to happen. So you must use those Asian countries, also including New Zealand and Australia. And you have to use the Americas. You're going to have to rely on Canada. You're going to have to rely on Mexico. You're going to have to rely on Central America. I got to tell you, if you're going to rely on Central America and South America, one thing that will happen, everybody's concerned about the money or the border, the southern border, right? Well, guess what? If they have work and opportunities in their home countries, they won't come to America, because those US dollars will go further in those Central American countries as opposed to those pesos, right? So think about it. So we need to restructure how we see that process, and going into a tariff or trade war with China is not the proper way to do this. Now, we're here now, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. But that's the reality of it. You need to look at TPP, and you need to be looking at other things in order to shore up our U.S. economy and obviously make it stronger. But you don't make it stronger through tariffs, right? So all that to be said, I'm gonna end with this. My degree is I said this before. My degree is in political science. So I look at this from a lens of, the politics surrounding these issues and what are the impacts. And most people are under the impression that a lot of what's happening today is Joe Biden's fault. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it's not. It's not. These are hangovers from the Trump administration. And for everything that the Trump administration, it's really strange. For everything that the Trump administration took credit for during their administration, you could say that was a product of the Obama administration. I got to tell you, it's a funny thing, but that's the cycle. The things that are happening today are cakes that were in the process of being baked long time ago. When I say long time ago, it took a few years for these things to kind of work their way into the system. I mean, think about it, folks. I mean, in 2016, average home prices were like $230,000, right? It's 2016. So not even 10 years later, you have average home prices of $470,000 in the United States. Why is that? That is because the material cost, along with the slack in the market, right? The slack in the supply chain due to the tariffs created higher prices, right? Those higher prices are passed off to the American people. So it makes it hard for young people to be able to get their first home. It makes it hard for the elderly to be able to make ends meet, right? When you think about them being retired and living primarily off of Social Security, right? So it makes it hard all the way around, and we have to do better. And I think the best way to go forward is to look at TPP and really get serious about our relationship with China, because, you know, in certain cases, they're not our friend. And since they're not our friend, we have to start moving these businesses out of China, but they got to have somewhere to land. Remember the Trump order, right? He ordered all these companies out of China. Where were they supposed to go? They can't go home in a lot of respects. Like I told you before, all these jobs can't come home. Okay, maybe the high-end jobs we want back here in the United States. The low-end stuff we can send elsewhere, right? We still want cheaper goods, right? So that being the case, folks, I want you to like and subscribe. I'm done for the evening. Hope you enjoyed the program. Have any questions, comments, put them in the comment section. Thanks a lot for listening to me rant and rave again tonight. Have a good evening.